Fresh outlook. Well, it certainly is a frightening situation in Syria. We've been seeing those images that we just showed you, and they are just so scary right now. More than 100,000 people have been killed, and the refugee crisis is one of the worst in 20 years, according to officials. But if the U.S. retaliates against the Assad regime using chemicals on its own people, will it create a world conflict? And we do welcome back Dee Dee Benkie. And we also have Dr. Bronner, and we have Jackie Guzda. So thank you again for joining us, everybody. We want to talk about this refugee crisis also. 2 million people are now streaming into Lebanon, streaming into Turkey, and these countries simply can't handle it. There's really nothing right now. There's more refugees coming over. What can we do to try and bring the world together to help these people?
Well, look, I mean, with the president, with what he's done, I mean, I really don't think there's going to be a strike because he's not going to get the support, and I don't think he wanted it to begin with, so it's very frustrating. But you do have to think about these people, these poor people and these children. I mean, they're being killed, gassed, it's terrible. So perhaps a humanitarian effort, I mean, at the very least, to try to take people in there and help the weakest out. It's a very sad situation. They need the help.
I think the first thing that should be done is to put some serious money back into UNRWA, the UN refugee organization, and also to build UNESCO, to put some money back into UNESCO, and work through them. You know, in Iraq, over 14% of children born since the invasion have had birth defects. The count of people of suffering hasn't even really begun yet.
Well, they have actually called this, some people have called this the lost generation for many of the children overseas. Mr. Bronner, if you can also, we were talking earlier, and for the folks who might just be joining us now, you actually met Bashar al-Assad, and just share some of the other aspects of his personality, if you will.
Well, he and his wife were incredibly gracious. I went with U.S. Academics for Peace, a mixed group, U.S. Academics for Peace and Conscience International. And there was a variety of activists like Bianca Jagger and various academics who were along. And we were very, very skeptical when we walked in. President Bashar tried to present himself as a reformer. He saw, when asked about the emergency laws which propped up his dictatorship, he said, without these laws, Syria would fragment. And you
said he was very pointed.
He was, and I mean, this is perhaps an embarrassing thing to say, and I'm not certainly an Assad supporter, but he was very clear in his judgment, very thoughtful, very articulate, and there were certain things which he nailed.
I mean, it's just amazing.
For example, he said if anything happens within Syria, it's going to spread to Lebanon, and there's going to be a refugee crisis.
Oh, we've already seen that.
Yeah, the idea of a fragmentation of Syria, which is nobody's really talking about this. And this is, I think, one of the most irritating aspects of this, is that people aren't talking about what's actually important, which is that the possibility of a breakup of Syria. What do you do about that? Well, the idea of an opposition where we don't know who the actual leaders of that opposition are. It seems to me, from my own experience, that the exile community, the Syrian National Council, and the Free Syrian Army are completely split. There's no real relation between them.
And there's nobody has been able to define who these rebels are also.
Exactly.
So there's a major problem there. But let's talk about the Syrians, as you were talking about, let's talk about the Syrians. Are they going to be happy if there is some sort of an intervention? I mean, we've been, a lot of, and I'll share a personal story also. My very close girlfriend is Syrian. She was a refugee from Lebanon, came to Syria, and then her family has all just fled within the last 2 weeks. And they are now back in Lebanon. And she has said that they are very upset with the United States for not helping out earlier. But if anybody does anything now, do you think that the Syrians are going to be happy? Dee Dee?
I think it depends who you're talking to. I'm sure many, of course, would, definitely, because they need the help. They're suffering, but maybe some others, wouldn't. I mean, I think that, saying that everything is split, it sounds like I'm sure that the country really is. I mean, when you're talking about war and you're talking about strikes, people are always going to be divided, just like we are here.
Yes, it's a very good point, Dee Dee.
I'm sorry, Jackie, you wanted to say something.
No, but you were hitting the nail on the head, is that they are split. You have all these different factions. So I agree with you totally that we should not have a military strike, because we've had military action in the Middle East over and over and over, and it's failed. So let's try something else. I love the idea of humanitarian action coming from the United States. And also, if Obama wants to be in your good graces again, I think he should really go out there and prove that he's the statesman that we voted for him to be. A little bit of creative statesmanism.
Well, I think
would help.
I think the United States has grown a little weary of becoming the policeman of the world at this point right now. And I think after Afghanistan and Iraq, that we're seeing a very not so much of divided nation. 80% of Americans have just, in a recent poll, have said they don't want to see any kind of military action.
I think there's something else that's not talked about enough, and that is we focus a lot on Obama, but I think Obama's, if I had to pick a weakness in his approach, I think he has the worst advisors that any president has had in a generation.
That's very interesting. That's interesting.
Definitely on this one.
There is,
for sure.
There's, if you think about it with regard to FDR, there's no Harry Hopkins here. There's no there's no brain trust.
No Karl
These are
Rove?
all,
Is that what you're saying?
no, I mean a brain trust. These are all Hillary's people, and Hillary Clinton's people who are pushing this. And all of them have if you think of Samantha Power, and you think of Susan Rice, and you think of Hillary herself, and you think of John Kerry, all of these people wound up supporting a war that President Obama did not support. And I think here his desire to bring the Democratic Party together is really working against him.
Do you see an isolated president not only here in the U.S., but obviously China, Russia, and even the United Kingdom, which was obviously very shocking?
Well, we are isolated. We don't have a coalition. I don't think France is enough of a coalition. I mean, and with the way the president has handled this, it's not going to happen. I mean, he has absolutely failed in this, and it's done.
But you can't have it both ways. You can't call it a humanitarian concern and say, we've got to do something, we've got to do something.
Yeah, but you've got to know what you're doing, Jackie. I mean, the problem with this president, he's not a military guy. We understand that. He's a community organizer. He's such a good campaigner. But he's really messed up this campaign.
You know what? You're playing politics, but you know what?
No,
playing
not at all.
politics in this circumstance, I think, is working out to our advantage. Because as I said previously, the Republican faction says no war, which we don't really expect out of them ever. But they're taking the right point of view. There should not be military action here. History has shown that it does not work in the Middle East coming from Big Brother United States. We've got to find another way to do this. And I hope that he does not get the support from Congress, so he's forced, and I agree with you,
he's dead on arrival.
Forced to take another road.
What is the prediction for this week, Dee Dee?
He's not going to get he could lose the Senate too. A lot of people saying, "Oh, the Senate's a slam dunk."
I think they were saying about a half of the Senate, maybe a third of Congress right now. That was the last of that.
I think it's going to be a bigger defeat than that. I don't think he's going to get.
What was I
going
to say about his presidency?
Very bad. Very bad. I think this will be his weakest moment, and and he was already kind of going downhill anyway. I think he was using this as a Hail Mary, which is terrible, and it's just not worked.
Well, I mean, I'm going to just I do think that a lot of people had been asking where the United States was on this particular issue.
The pressure was unbelievable from all sides. I mean, for example, the Republican Party has been on the case for a bombing of Iran. That was just a mistake. It's clear that there's been a change in Iran with the new President Rouhani. The pressure has been, I mean, there's enough hypocrisy here to go around on all sides. There's been an emphasis upon a more forceful strategy, but the more forceful strategy makes no sense either, because that's not connected to anything either. It's not connected to regime change. It's not connected to nation building, and it's certainly not connected to a humanitarian effort because we don't know who we're helping,
Well,
putting it crudely.
Right.
absolutely. We thank you all for your expertise on this subject. Obviously, tensions will remain high throughout the world, and we will certainly be watching here on A Fresh Outlook. Don't go away, everyone. This week, of course, is the 12th anniversary of the September 11th terror attacks. How has America and the world changed, and what are some of the positive lessons that we have learned? We'll be right back.